can't tell. Which I can't.
Hello, John.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. Welcome to Sports and History class here at DC Everest. Thanks for being here. We've never done this before, so this is our trial run, Mr. McNamara. You are our guinea pig, so thank you.
Absolutely. Happy to do it.
And we all have our awesome masks on, so you can't really see our faces, but that's okay. Why we brought you here, why you're here, and thank you again for doing this for us, is we, in the sports and history class, one of the things that we've looked at and talked about is just wanted to maybe ask you some questions and hear from somebody who's in the media covering sports for a living and what that is like. So could you just maybe start by talking about kind of your background maybe a little bit and maybe what your school experience was like in college, kind of pursuing something for media? Is that what you went to school for? And could you talk maybe a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I grew up in Franklin, which is just outside of the Milwaukee area. I went to the University of Wisconsin, and when I got on campus there, I had no clue what I wanted to do. I knew the things that I didn't like or that I wasn't very good at. I wasn't very good at science. I wasn't very good at math. And I took a business class there, and I knew that wasn't for me either. So, as I continue to take classes, you kind of identify the things that you are good at. I knew that I always loved sports. I played sports growing up, was never good enough to play sports in college. But then I got attached to the school newspaper at the University of Wisconsin. It's called the Daily Cardinal. And I just kind of dove into that. And I really enjoyed that. Got a lot of really good experience. Did a few internships at a couple newspapers that don't exist anymore because that's kind of the way that newspapers have went. And then, you know what? I graduated and I didn't know what I was going to do. I was working at Best Buy, and I got connected with a guy who was running the Rivals.com Wisconsin site. And I was writing for him. I was making about $5 per story, as all my friends were beginning, real jobs with real money and stuff like that. So my journey was a little bit different, I guess, a little bit more not traditional. But then I ended up, working under him for about a year, and then I moved into his position, and I've still been doing that now for about 15 years. So I think, as I kind of reflect back on that, it was important for me to find out, what I didn't want to do before I arrived at what I did want to do. And that's not specific to, just my path. I think that'll be, something that, all high school kids go through, whether, you go into college or you go into the workforce right away. Sometimes it's finding what you don't want to do before you arrive at what you do want to do and what you're really good at.
That's really interesting. Hey, I had a question, thinking about this, going back now a little bit in your story. So how did you reach out to the Rivals.com guy to even start writing the stories? What was that like? Did you send an email? Was there like an advertisement? How did you get connected with that?
Yeah, so my buddy actually, I was going to say texted, but you know what? We weren't even texting back then. He called me. He's like, "Hey man, like there's this ad in the paper for someone who wants to do some work for Rivals.com. You should follow through with it." So the guy's name was Paul Day. I remember I met him at a coffee shop. It was right around when it was like a semester before I graduated. He's like, "Yeah, I'm looking for someone to help me out here." I had done a lot of work with the student newspaper. I was interested to go into the recruiting side of it, which is kind of the lifeblood of what we do at Rivals.com. And he brought me on. And like I said, I was working for $5 a story. So obviously that was not supporting very much of my life in terms of what I needed to do with money. But, I was working at Best Buy. I was still living with buddies and stuff like that. And, during that time, like I said, a lot of my friends who are engineers and stuff like that, they were getting offered great jobs and they were moving around. So like I said, my journey was a little bit different, but very fortunate the way it worked out because I worked under him for about a year. So he kind of taught me things, showed me the ropes. And then he's like, hey, look, I'm moving back to Michigan. I'd like you to take over the site. And, I'm very happy that I did kind of have patience at that time. And I was able to, be in a position where, I learned for a year until I got the position that I'm currently in.
That's such a cool story. It sounds like you have such a passion for what you do. And that was kind of the driving factor of, hey, I'll work for $5 a story while I do Best Buy because I really I enjoy this, or this is something that, I want to pursue because it's an interest, it's a hobby, it's a passion of mine. And you took that and made that now obviously a career, which is super cool to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. I knew I loved sports, right? And I knew that I was never going to make any money playing sports. So these two things kind of meshed really well. And I explored a lot of things where, I said, I'd love to work for the Brewers or the Packers in some capacity. And, those jobs are kind of specific to, well, are you good in business? Are you good in marketing? Are you good in this area? So, I took my passion for sports and I combined it with my ability to write. Again, I wasn't strong in math. I wasn't strong in science, but I was a pretty strong writer. So those two things kind of meshed really well. And it seemed like kind of a perfect fit once I did figure that out. And again, I walked into school, into a college campus, I had no idea what I wanted to do. So when those two worlds kind of clicked, it kind of happened really quickly for me. And I really started to enjoy that. So again, it took me a little bit longer than maybe other people. But once that connection kind of clicked, it worked out really well for me. So again, it's no matter what field you want to go into, if you're passionate about something and you're willing to put the work in, more times than not, your employer is going to be able to find a spot for you. And they're going to be able to teach you the things that you struggle in. I'm still not a perfect writer. I still make mistakes, but the people that I train and the people that I've hired are people that are super passionate about it and they're willing to put the work in. And that's not specific to, sports media. That's anywhere you're going to go. So if you're passionate about something, you're going to find people are willing to teach you and willing to pay you because of your passion. They're willing to kind of teach you the odds and ends along the way, as long as you have that passion and you have that drive.
Yeah, I love that message because in this class, we have primarily seniors. I think everybody in this room right now is a senior. And so they're about to, many of them go off on their college journey. So could you tell us, what was your major in then? Because obviously you wrote for the newspaper, right? But what was your major then? And what was your degree in? And because I think it's going to be important to hear for these guys, if it wasn't in journalism then, you made that your career eventually, but maybe you didn't have a degree in that, and that's okay, right? You still are able to make it even without a degree, maybe specifically in something that your career is not in.
Yeah, that's a great question. I have a degree in journalism, but it took me. So I got into the University of Wisconsin barely. I mean, if I would applied now, I probably wouldn't have got in the way that the requirements are. And then after about 2 years, or maybe about a year and a half, you apply to be in the school of journalism, which is a specific school within the university itself. And the rule of thumb, I remember at that time, it was no one gets in on the first time unless you have a 4.0 and, you have some sort of connections. And then everyone kind of gets in the second time. Well, I didn't get in the first time. I didn't get in the second time. And then I was like, you know what? I don't care. I have really good experience at the newspaper. I have really good experience with internships, and I was just going to graduate with a degree in English. And then, one day I remember I went to lunch with he was the sports editor at the Capital Times, really at that time, kind of a mentor, someone that, taught me an awful lot. He's like, hey, look, you should apply one more time. I'm going to write you a letter of recommendation. I'm from the journalism school as well. And so I really think that his letter of recommendation with my application for a third time kind of snuck me in the door. I think they were also kind of sick of me applying. So they're just like, hey, look, let this guy in, let him finish up. So Yeah, I mean, again, it didn't work out perfectly. I mean, my first application was terrible. And looking back, my second application I felt really good about. I felt it was strong. I felt it had everything that I needed, and I was, I was really kind of hurt when I didn't get in. And then you're wondering, like, do I belong on this campus? Do I belong in this profession? But I kind of made the decision there of like, I enjoy what I do right now on campus. I think I have the skills to do it, and I think I have the experience. So, you know what? I don't think my career would have been any different had I graduated with a degree in English as opposed to a degree in journalism, because when I went to Rivals and they made a decision to hire me, they didn't say, well, hold on, we have to have a degree in journalism here. They weren't interested in that. They were more interested in what I've done for the company so far, what my past experiences was, and who are the people that could speak to me and say, hey, look, this guy can do the job. So obviously it's great to have that journalism background. I'm very proud of my degree, but I don't know that it was a deal breaker. Had I not been accepted into that, and had I not gotten that degree, then things would have been completely different for me. So, if you go to school and, you don't get in the exact program that you want, but you have all these great real life experiences, people are going to work with that. So don't think it's a deal breaker that, I didn't get into the, the business school, but if you interned at all these great places and you have people that say, hey, this guy can do it, or this girl can do it, absolutely. People are going to make that work. So don't feel like you need to be tied into something specifically, or else you just can't make it in that field. Again, I think it goes back to that passion too. Are you willing to work? Are you willing to do those things? And people are going to find ways around it. And you know what? Degrees are flexible, right? I mean, you go in and say, I have a degree in biology, but this is like all the things I can do with biology. And maybe they'll hire you for a specific thing. So it's kind of how you sell yourself, what your like individual brand is, what your experiences are, and what you can bring to an employer. It's much greater than just the degree. I've hired guys at the University of Wisconsin who have, they were business majors, but they're like, hey, I love to write. And I love recruiting stuff. And I was like, yeah, that's find a home for you. I can teach you, the things that I need you to do as long as you have that passion for it.
I think that's awesome insight. I love that you were able to share, especially the real world experience that you had writing for the newspaper, obviously getting connected in the medicine community, then with some newspapers and things that way, and having a mentor that pushed you, right? Hey, apply again. And then having person think so highly of you that they wrote you that letter to help you get in. I think that's awesome. And just the perseverance, right? Keep trying, even though, at first the door's being slammed in your face, but like keep trying and you never know. So I love, thank you for sharing that. I know I've been asking a lot of the questions. So does anybody in here, and I got some other questions, but do you guys have some questions now? Thinking about what Mr. McNamara shared, thinking about, yourself personally. I mean, we have a few kids in here that are going to be college athletes too. So thoughts or questions that any of you are thinking of or want to know from Mr. McNamara?
What does a typical workday look like for you?
That's a great question. This is, I mean, okay, I'll tell you a story. I went, when I was maybe a little bit older than you guys, I went to work with my dad, and my dad's an accountant, and he is very much like a 9-to-5 guy. And I talked about, figuring out what you don't want to do. And I went to work with him like during like a spring break because he wanted me to do some things. And I was like, there was no way I can sit in a cubicle all day and do what my dad does. And my dad, he loves numbers and he loves all that accounting stuff. So I found out early that like I could not do that. So my job is absolutely not 9-to-5. It's kind of continuous, and that's one thing that I would say. If you ask me the things that I don't love about what I do, it's kind of always happening. I've ran out of dinners, with friends because a kid is committed to Wisconsin, and I'm trying to get that story up. I'm kind of constantly checking my phone on Twitter and making sure I'm up to date on all the things that are going on. So the job is not a traditional 9-to-5 where at 5 o'clock you check out and you don't think about it until 9 o'clock the next morning. So it's, part of that is made it such an important part of my life where sometimes My mood is affected based on how things are going with the website, based on if I have enough content for the day. So at the same time, I'm not tied into a very strict schedule, right? I think it gives me some freedom to, if I'm well prepared from the day before, I can sleep in a little bit later. Or if I know that I got a busy day tomorrow, I can go to bed a little bit earlier, but get stuff cranked out at 5 a.m, then be good for a good chunk of time. So if you like having that flexibility, this is something that that might be for you. But it's it's constant, right? I mean, I've looked at the website every day now for 15 years. I remember I did a little bit of work on my wedding day, where Wisconsin got a commitment on my wedding day, and I knew about it, and I clicked over and I published a story as we were taking pictures. And thankfully, my wife met me at a time where she knew what I was all about and what the job was all about. So if you enjoy that part of it, maybe the field of media or journalism is something that is right for you, because it's very much not a 9-to-5 job.
Awesome. Thank you. Other questions from anyone else before I ask some more questions? Anybody else have a question?
What is the role of the media to you?
The role of media?
Yeah, what do you think?
That is a great question. You could probably spend a whole semester on that. In the times that we're living in right now, I mean, just beyond sports, just the relationship of media and the consumer, I think it's an incredible topic. We've seen, our president get barred from Twitter, and the messages that he puts out, and I'm not coming on here saying one way or the other. I'm just saying that that's something. And the way that we look at credible media sources, right? The way that you guys consume media and the decisions that you have to make, right? You have so many options available to you in how you want to consume media and how you want to base your opinions. That when I was growing up, it's like if it was in the newspaper, you believed it because that was credible and it was vetted, and people checked up on it. And it's just not that way anymore. So I always encourage people, friends specifically, of like, hey, you're consuming this information, but you need to make sure that it's credible. And it's weird for me to say that I have like these old school traditional views on journalism, where it's important for me to bring the product to my subscribers and the people who follow me, but it's also far more important to me to get the information correct. And that's first and foremost. And I think that we are in a time right now where journalists feel like they have to be first, regardless of if they're presenting the correct information. And that gets people in trouble a lot, where, you've seen people report on people who have passed away, and it wasn't the case. So the urge to be first, I think, is something that is troubling in journalism right now and in media right now, where I think it's so much more important to be accurate and to be presenting, the unbiased facts about things. So, as you guys consume so much information throughout the course of the day, it's so important to be able to form your opinions based on credible news sources, and not necessarily like memes from Facebook where you deem them to be accurate. So again, I think it's a fascinating conversation with just the amount of information that young people are able to consume, but then saying, hey, look, is what I'm digesting right now, is it accurate? Is it credible? And I think that, Facebook and Twitter, they've gone to some lengths to improve that. Because, right now, anyone with a laptop and an internet connection can say, I'm reporting on this, or I'm reporting on that, and I've kind of had my battles specific to, sports journalism, where it's really important for me to be at a game and to cover that game and to get quotes in person, where the same guy who's laying on his couch can do the same thing. They can watch the game from their couch. They can regurgitate all the quotes that they heard from someone else. So it's an excellent question. I'm glad you brought that up. And it's just so important to me to kind of have those old school journalistic roots that, I probably learned in the journalism school at Wisconsin, where it's, you want to present the information in a factual way. And it doesn't necessarily mean being the first one on Twitter to break a story, because you know what? At the end of the day, that's not even that important, because, once I break a story, someone else has it within 7 seconds. So presenting the correct information, whether people love it or people hate it, I think that needs to be the most important thing. And as you guys and girls go about your day, making sure that, you take in as many things as you want, but as you're forming your opinions, whether it's about sports or politics, or whatever's going on in the world, make sure that you're getting it from a credible news source. Because I just think that is so important right now.
Yeah, I agree. A lot of these guys, they're all on social media, right? So,
yeah.
They're consuming content, obviously, like big time, right? And so I think that's a great lesson for them. And so thank you for sharing that. Now, we do have a couple of people in here that are going to be playing college football, and you obviously cover recruiting big time and talking to these athletes. Could you tell us maybe a little bit from your perspective what it's like to have these conversations with these 18 to 22-year-olds, and then, what you're looking for when you talk to someone, what makes it difficult when you interact with these recruits or these players, and what makes a really good interview, and maybe even some tips on dealing with the media for some of these student athletes.
Okay. I'm sorry. I caught the tail end of that. Could you just start the question over, because my computer faded out there?
It's all good. So we got a couple guys in here. Actually, unfortunately, I only have one female in my sports and history class, and we have a cohort system. So you're only seeing half my class right now, because the other half comes tomorrow. But we have some college athletes in here that are going to be college athletes, and so when they deal with the media. Okay, so you interviewing them or whatever it might look like, do you have some tips for them and what that interaction should look like? And then could you talk about some interviews that are really, really good and why, and then some maybe that aren't so good and why not? So just give them maybe some tips or some things to consider, and even what they put out on social media as student athletes.
Yeah, that was kind of where my mind was drifting. You're kind of creating your own brand, right? And the likeness and image that are coming up in NCAA football are part of that. So essentially, as an athlete who plays beyond high school, or even you've seen some high school athletes who have already created this. You're creating your own brand and you're controlling your own message on social media, and that could either be really positive, or that could be really negative. And it could be as simple as you liking a tweet, or you retweeting something that was controversial that essentially you're saying, I believe this, or I represent this. So controlling your narrative is something that I think is so cool about social media, but at the same time, it's a great way to, destroy your brand or destroy yourself, or really make you seem like maybe something that you're not, based on something that you tweet or put on Facebook or put on Instagram, whatever it may be. So, being really conscious of how you present yourself to the public is so important for, not only athletes, but anyone who is in the spotlight, or anyone wants to go dig through your Twitter and say, hey, look, I found something from 10 years ago from this guy, and look what he said now, and look how bad it makes him sound. So being able to control that narrative, I think, is great. But being so conscious of what you put on social media, and that goes beyond sports, right? And beyond entertainment. Social media is a great way, whether you like it right now or not, to lose your job. I'm sure that Mr. Hansen can speak to this as a teacher. Right? And I don't want to speak for him, but he can't just go on Facebook and say, well, I believe this, and everyone who doesn't believe this is wrong. You have to be careful with that. Just as you become a professional in whatever route that you take. In terms of engaging with the media, I've had people who are just these phenomenal speakers, and they just give the best quotes, and we always love that. But at the same time, you have these, kind of coach speak people who, they just give you the bare bones and the basics, and they give you very generic answers. And I wouldn't say that I would encourage you to be one way or the other. I would just encourage you to be the person who you are. If you're a person who's a great storyteller and you like to talk about yourself and you like to talk about your experiences, then absolutely go with that. But if you're a person who's reserved and, the speaking about yourself is not a thing, that's okay. There's no right or wrong there. And I've seen, both spectrums of these amazing people who tell these amazing stories and the people who just give you nothing. And obviously I prefer talking to the people who's going to give the best quote, but you have no obligation to, make someone's story or tell someone's story or do that job for them. So, at the same time, when you get on these college campuses, you'll have someone in that athletic department who will talk to you about, the media is probably going to ask you this, and this is how we would like you to respond. So, know that you're not just speaking for yourself, but you're speaking for your teammates a lot of times, and you're speaking for your university. And sometimes what you say needs to line up with what their values are. But I think the biggest thing with that, and this is not, like I said, specific to sports or entertainment, you represent yourself on social media. And that goes if you are, LeBron James or if you're a carpenter. And if your carpenting company doesn't like that you endorse someone or something, they can bring that up and they can use it against you. So just being so conscious of what you guys do on social media, no matter what you're passionate about or what you're going to do, is really important. You know what? And I think when I get to the end of this journey, I never want to be on Facebook again. I never want to be on Twitter again. I'm excited to kind of separate myself from those things because I'm on Twitter constantly and I see some really stupid things and I see some really great things. So just be conscious of how you represent yourself on social media, and no matter what you want to kind of dive into after high school.
Awesome. Any other questions from you guys? I got maybe one or two left that I'd like to ask, but question, any other you want to know from Mr. McNamara here? I'm kind of a super nerd when it comes to history and sports, which is why I teach sports and history, which is pretty cool to have a class like this at DC Everest. But so I'm a consumer like you probably on Twitter. Obviously, I follow Badger Blitz. I love what you guys do at that publication. I've been following that for a long time. I love recruiting, basketball, and football, so it's really fun as a UW fan to follow what you guys do. With the recruiting part of things and being a reporter, are you constantly also looking at these students' Twitter and Instagram stuff? And then are you using some of the content you see there to ask questions when you interview these kids when they're coming into UW? And then I guess I'll throw my other question in right now too. How important is it to develop relationships with these kids and coaches and trainers in order to get these good stories and have these good interviews?
Yeah. I'll tackle the second part of that first. It is, I'm really glad you brought that up. It is so crucial to have those relationships, not only with the people that I cover, but, those coaches and sometimes teachers and sometimes parents in the lives of the people I cover. And it's not like, and I want to be really clear about this. It's not like, okay, when I cover a kid, I want to be like really good friends with that kid. It's the complete opposite. I just want to tell that story. I feel lucky enough to have told a lot of stories about a lot of really great kids who have become great college players who have gone on to become great pro players. So it's not like, hey, let me try to become friends with this guy so one day he'll remember me and he'll be able to do whatever I need to get done. It's the complete opposite. It's, hey, look, this is what I do as a job, and I want to tell your story, and I want to build that relationship. So, when I cover a kid very early in the process and things are just kind of getting started for that kid, I can call that kid later when he kind of blows up, right? And he's got all the offers and he's got all these people in his ear. He's saying, hey, look, I remember, Jon McNamara. And I remember, he's been with me through this whole process and, he's doing things the right way. So then when I call, when he's ready to make a commitment, he says, hey, yeah, I trust this guy. I know what this guy's about. And, he's going to do the right thing, when it comes to my story. Right. And it's relationships are so important in anything that you get involved in. But I mean, there's a lot of coaches who, I talked to in 2010 and then I talked to in 2017 and hey, now you got another guy coming through your school. Can I rely on you? And say, oh yeah, absolutely. I know who you are. I follow you on Twitter. You're not an idiot. So yeah, I mean, we can engage in those conversations and they can say, hey, look, you know what, when you're talking to, player X, this is a really interesting thing about him. And this is a story that you should tell. And then, that makes things interesting when you are saying something different and you're reporting something different about a kid that maybe someone else doesn't have because you do have that relationship, with their parent or with their teacher or with their coach. So, no matter what you do, I think relationships are just so critical in your professional life, in whatever you choose to do. Yeah. And then the first part of that, I got kind of all hyped up about the second part. What was the first part of that question?
I'll ask it this way. So you talked a little bit earlier about how social media can be kind of a negative for you.
Yeah.
How do you see social media maybe as a positive and has maybe helped you? I mean, you said 15 years you've been working for Rivals.com, I believe. So like over that 15 years, what has changed maybe for you? And I'm guessing social media is a big piece of that. And how has that maybe helped you as a journalist?
Yeah, again, if I'm going to write a story on someone, I'm going to check on that stuff. And I'm not looking for I want to find something really bad about the person. I'm just looking for things that I can write about. So, if I go on your Twitter page and I see things about, maybe the music that you like or some of your accomplishments, those are the things I want to ask you about. So it's how you present yourself to the public. So, I don't want to go into a story not knowing anything about you and just kind of hope that you do some great stuff. I want to learn more about you as a person so I can ask interesting questions to hopefully get a unique and interesting story. So, like I said, I've seen thousands of Twitter profiles and, if you're looking to be recruited, like say, hey, look, I'm a really good football player. Don't have your name be like all about my dollars 25, and I have to play like some guessing game to try to figure out who you are. This is my name. This is the year I graduate. Here's the link to my film. Here's the high school I go to. Here are some of the things that I've accomplished. So and that just makes it easier on college coaches who are looking at you. It makes it easier on people who want to tell your story. So again, if you think that you're going to be someone who's going to have a chance to play beyond high school, represent yourself accurately on social media. So I don't have to guess to see, is it really this guy or is it like a fake account or am I talking to the right person? That's very, very important. And I would say it's far more important for the colleges that are looking at you, right? So represent yourself accurately because you can control that narrative. And if you want to have a Twitter account just to be a joke, and that's totally fine too. But it makes it difficult for a college coach to be like, is this the guy that I wanted to reach out to today and offer a scholarship, or is this some a different thing? So again, if use social media the way that you want to use it. You don't. If you're not someone who's going to play beyond that, and you just want to have fun with social media and you want to create a weird name, more power to you. That's fine. But if you're like, hey, why am I not being recruited? And your name is some bogus thing, and your Twitter's all messed up. That could be a reason why.
That's so interesting. Also, I don't know if you realize this, Jon, but you're a historian. You do research on these people. I love that. So as we talk about that here, I think sometimes students don't realize that a lot of times they're historians. They're doing research. They're getting background on things before they make a decision, or And then you're doing that by looking at these kids' accounts, and you're doing this research, getting this background so you can ask good questions. So last thing, and again, thank you so much for taking time to do this. These guys, for their final assignment / project in this semester-long class, they have to interview someone from our area, so like the greater Wausau kind of area, that was a high school athlete, but also a college athlete. And it could be someone kind of recent, it could be someone that they know, it could be whatever. So they've had to come up with questions, and they're looking for kind of, some of the similarities and differences between a high school athlete and a college athlete and a student athlete, right? Because academics is a big piece of that as well. Any advice for them when they're doing these interviews? And then two, like what, from your perspective in the media, do you see as some of the biggest differences or similarities between a high school athlete, student athlete, and a college student athlete?
Yeah, that's an interesting final project. That's much better than like a 100-question test, right? So it was kind of, a good segue, right? Because, as you identify this person that you want to talk to, you got to do your homework, right? And you have to know as much as you can going into that interview as possible. I wouldn't be opposed to writing down a list of questions then based on that homework that you've done. I remember right when I was doing this, Jim Leonard was the first guy I interviewed, and I had like my list of questions, and I was looking at him, and he's like eye length to me. He's like 5'7", 5'8", and I felt really new, but I mean, I did my homework and I had those questions. Whereas if I just went into it as like, hey, like what makes you a great football player? So I went into that first interview and I remember it, and I had a lot of stuff written down, but it was really helpful because one, I was nervous. And I was talking to someone who, was a really good football player at the time, but it was really good. So if I lost my train of thought, I went back to my paper, and that guided me. And again, like Jim Leonard probably looked at me as like, who is this idiot that I'm talking to right now? But I was prepared, right? And so it was good. It worked out well. And I learned a lot from it. So whoever you choose to do, make sure that you can gather as much information about that person. I would go in with like, hey, here's like 10 things I need to ask this person. But if the conversation is drifting a different way, absolutely go with it. You don't have to stick with that exact list. If this person that you choose is starting to tell an amazing story, ask follow-up questions about that story. Who was with you when that happened? How did that make you feel when that happened? When you got hurt, who was there to, rehab you and get you back on track? So, just because you come in with those 10 questions doesn't mean that you have to stick with those, and those are the only things that you can ask about. If the conversation goes a different way and you think it's super interesting and you think it's the story that needs to be told, absolutely go with it. I mean, I went in like, hey, I'm going to write this story about this, and I know that these are the things I want to hit on. And then we have that conversation in the interview, and I'm like, wow, I'm going to scrap everything that I thought I was going to do, and this is the most important thing that people are going to want to read about this specific person. So do your homework, but don't be afraid to have a story go a different way than you anticipated. And then the difference between high school and college, I think that gap is kind of shrinking, right? Because I think high school athletes are realizing that they have the same sort of attention sometimes as that of a college athlete. And, I don't know how closely you guys follow, but like a guy like J.J. McCarthy, he was a quarterback from the state of Illinois, went down to IMG Academy, and essentially since he's been a freshman in high school, has demanded attention similar to that of a college athlete or a pro athlete. And, I talk about building your brand. I mean, J.J. McCarthy and his camp of people have intentionally been building his brand since he was a freshman. So when he goes from high school to Michigan, where he's signed to play, it's not going to be that much different in terms of how he deals with the media. I mean, he's become savvy with that. He's controlled his narrative. He's put the message out there that he's wanted to. So I think, when I was a high school athlete, and again, I never played beyond high school. No one ever wanted me to play beyond high school. But, think about the guys that did go on to play. I mean, there was no Twitter, there was no Facebook, so there was no, having that experience with the media. I mean, sometimes the local paper would come and say, hey, what'd you think about that win over so-and-so? And you give some generic quote, and that would be it. But those two things now have meshed so much, and there's so much attention, I think, on high school kids because there's an appetite for that. I mean, people love to read about high school sports. I love to cover high school sports more so than I like to cover pro or college sports. So I think the gap has kind of closed with that. So, there isn't that big jump of like, hey, I need to learn so many different things, because I think you end up learning a lot of that as a high school athlete because there are more eyes on you, more people are interested in your story because there's just more people speaking about you. And, Huddle has changed that. I mean, you guys can, when DC Evers goes and plays someone, you have all this film on people and you know who you're playing against. So everything is just, there's just more to consume about that in a lot of different areas. So I think that the gap is a little bit smaller compared to when I was going through high school and the athletes that I knew that would go on to play college football or college sports in general.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I thought this was fantastic. I'll definitely be reaching out again if you'd be willing to do this again. I have another semester class that I'll have this coming semester, so I'd love to have you in again if you'd be willing to. So this was great. Thank you so much. I think we all learned something and took something away from this. So I appreciate it. Jon, thank you for your time and have an awesome rest of your day and continue to do us proud with UW and coverage. So thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for having me. This was a lot of fun. I have a challenge for everyone in this class.
Awesome.
My wife is a teacher, and I know Mr. Hansen, and I have teachers who are buddies. My challenge to you guys in this room, and if there's a girl in there, I heard maybe a girl, maybe go out and just say thank you to a teacher at some point this week, or tell a teacher that they did something really great this week, because it's been a challenging year for, I'm sure, everyone in your building as a student, but I know that your teachers are feeling that too. So my challenge to you is to thank a teacher this week, or tell a teacher that you found something interesting that they did, or just say, hey, you're doing a great job. So that's my challenge to the DC Everest kids in this class right now.
Awesome. Thanks, Jon.
All right. We'll see you guys.
All right. Take care.